Well, hello, Austin.
Hey, Erin.
And hello, listeners/viewers. Welcome to NCITE Insights. This is a new podcast that we hope will try to make sense of the headlines as they relate to terrorism and targeted violence. So my name is Erin Grace. I direct communications and external relations for the National Counterterrorism Innovation, Technology, and Education Center, or NCITE. We are a Department of Homeland Security funded center of excellence. We are the largest terrorism research consortium in the country. And with me today is Austin Doctor. He is an assistant professor of political science and head of counterterrorism research initiatives. So thank you for coming today, Austin.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Thank you for being a guinea pig.
Mm-hmm.
We hope our audience is forgiving today. Okay, so apologies up front, listeners and guest Austin, as we pilot this brief report. Our job is to create new knowledge and to make sense of the things happening in our world. We are supposed to share it out with the public, and this is just another way we're going to try to do that. And we decided what America really needs is a new podcast, so we are adding to that. Let's dive in. Today's topic is drones. Austin is leading a research project examining how geospatial tech can be used to launch attacks against critical infrastructure and crowds. And just this past Sunday, on January 28th, we saw a drone strike on a U.S. base in Jordan, killed 3 people, 3 soldiers, and injured dozens more. And it's a developing story, but let's just start with the basics, with the type of weapon that was used, a drone or an unmanned aerial system. What can you tell us about the weapon?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start by saying, start with the large caveat that we're still waiting for official reporting on the type of system that was used to conduct this attack. But I think, first off, just based off of the damage and harm that the attack created, we can assume that this wasn't your commercial off-the-shelf quadcopter system that you can buy at Walmart, right? Using a jerry-rigged system for deploying something like a small hand grenade, right? Which is a type of system and type of drone attack profile that we've seen militants use in the region. I think it's more likely, based off of what we saw in the immediate aftermath of the attack, that this was a more sophisticated system, and one that I would qualify as a military-grade UAS. Likely a one-way, or what people have referred to as a kamikaze-style drone system, rather than one that's designed to be used in the field and then actually piloted and redirected back to a base or back to the user. So we're looking at a relatively sophisticated system in this attack. Things that I'm looking for right now are evidence, I think many others are looking for, is evidence of whether or not the components within this device point back to obviously a state sponsor, right? And specifically here in the subtext is the state of Iran. This is a state that's known to develop and then disseminate relatively affordable but sophisticated high-capacity drone systems across its network of proxy militant forces in the region.
So with that said, I don't expect you to know all the particulars since we're waiting for information, but how close do you have to be to operate something like this physically?
Yeah, great question. So if this drone system is the type that I would expect, something like what's called a part of maybe the Shaheed suite of Iranian-based platforms, then we'd be looking at an operational range up to 1,500 miles.
Oh, wow.
So this is a medium to long range, or system capable of medium to long range operations. This is, as I said, not something where you need to be within 200 yards in your backyard in order, or even to have a visual to pilot and command the device or platform.
1,500 miles. I'm wrapping my brain around that while also thinking of, some reporting, I think by AP that, that base was anticipating a drone, a UAS that our military had, like you just described, sent out to come back. And so they didn't shoot this one down.
Yeah, that's right. And I think part of that is likely due to the fact that, quote, Tower 22, the base where this attack was conducted, is based in Jordan, right? Which is not typically a country where we observe attacks against American installations or troops. Now, just over the border in Syria and Iraq, we've seen over 160 attacks by Iranian-backed and supported militias, specifically against U.S. troops and assets just since October in the Hamas attack.
160?
Yeah, so it's been an incredibly high tempo sort of set of operations over the past couple of months that look a lot like this one, that involve missiles, that involve drones. These proxies have been playing with fire, right? Trying to use force to probably, I think, compel U.S. forces to leave, but without escalating things beyond control. And in this case, it felt inevitable based off how often, how frequently they were issuing these attacks that eventually U.S. personnel were going to come in harm's way. The question is what happens next?
Is this one capturing our attention simply because people were killed? Because you tell me 160, and I can think of a few. I just didn't realize that number was so high.
Yeah, I think that is part of the reason, rightfully so, that it's caught so much of the news cycle's attention. But I think it's also important to note that just over the past couple of months, dozens of persons have received critical injuries, head trauma, as a result of these attacks. The three service members who died over the weekend happened to be the first fatal casualties of this broader drone and missile-based campaign that we're seeing in the region against U.S. forces.
This is a dummy question, Austin, so forgive me, and audience forgive me, but does this device, does it carry a payload that it drops, or is it in itself a bomb, essentially?
Yeah, great. Yeah, so again, the big disclaimer here is that we don't have official reporting on the type of system that was used. But if it is the sort of platform that I'm anticipating it to be, this Iranian-based platform or a copy of these types of systems, then yeah, this would be a one-way style platform, meaning that the warhead or the munition would be actually located on the device itself, and it would detonate upon impact. So the entire thing is meant for single use.
That is very interesting. We talked about this, Austin, a month or so ago. When you look at how does the U.S. defend against attacks by these things, and one drone versus what a missile,
Yeah.
what is the cost differential and how?
Yeah. Some drones, particularly those commercial off-the-shelf systems, can be acquired for just a few $100s. This type of more sophisticated system, again, without official reporting, but that I'm expecting to have been involved in this attack, costs anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 per platform. And so it's not chump change, but when you consider the ratio of the costs on the flip side that are needed to actually counter that threat, it's still in the favor of these militants, and by a considerable margin, meaning that every time they're shelling out $20,000 to $50,000, the other side that's responsible for countering that attack is paying much more, meaning that even an successfully intercepted attack, is still in some ways a success for the militants that are issuing these. And it just continues to actually exacerbate sort of the cost asymmetries for U.S. personnel or its partners or local government forces that are trying to establish a baseline of security and safety for local populations.
I mean, they certainly are very effective, aren't they, for being mosquitoes, really,
right.
compared to what we have. So tell us more broadly, how are UASs being used in war zones or conflict? Thinking of Ukraine, of course.
Sure, and actually the same type of, speaking of Ukraine, this type of platform, the Shahed model, has been exported by Iran and seen used by Russian forces against Ukraine. And so we've seen this tactic, this TTP, disseminated on a global scale. And then on the flip side, we've seen Ukraine really accomplish some amazing feats in the way that they've been able to scale production of very cost-affordable systems and to employ them rapidly in the field, again, at scale. Now, the Ukrainian forces use a blend of systems. Some of them are more sophisticated military-grade platforms with longer-range capabilities, but they've also found a way to incorporate commercial systems and jerry-rig those with smaller munitions to have now tactical effects, right, against in specific engagements, but to create a lot more disruption against a conventional invasion force. Now you look at that same logic and you look at what's happening in the Middle East right now, militants are using them to the same effect. The Islamic State, right, was really successful in creating, they had their own drone manufacturing plant, they had their own department for drone manufacturing, they would purchase and retrofit commercial systems, and were able to create outsized effect and actually achieve what I think was referred to as, quote, tactical air superiority for a time being against U.S. forces, right? Not for nothing. The most powerful military force in the world. And that's in part because they were able to innovate. They were able to find margins, to get a foothold, and introduce something new, something where the existing security infrastructure, counter protocols weren't fully established and ready to meet that threat head on.
Well, Austin, you teed yourself up perfectly for what I was going to ask next, which is, how do we counter that? And so tell us about your geospatial project, why you started looking at this well before the October 7th Hamas attack, which has triggered all these things.
Sure. Yeah, so my work focuses on militants, terrorists, but particularly the ways that they plan their operations and try to get one step ahead of security, sort of opposing security forces. And one of the ways we've seen that happen over the past 10 years is through unmanned aerial systems in particular. And so, I've been conducting research on the Islamic State's drone program, on actually the Houthis drone program out of Yemen, for quite some time, and now more recently starting to look at, okay, what are the geospatial related elements here, recognizing that many drone systems use geolocated information to operate, but also act as producers of that information to then be sent back to users, meaning that they can be really useful depending on the types of sensors that are located on these devices for intelligence gathering, for surveillance and reconnaissance, supporting more effective operational planning. Again, looking at the Hamas attack of October 7th and the various ways that drones were incorporated into that attack for the purposes of propaganda, for the purposes of pre-attack staging, combined arms, so creating distractions so that other munitions and other fronts or elements of the assault could successfully infiltrate Israeli territory. Drones were a big part of the success of that attack in that day. And so this project is really focused on just trying to better understand the nature of that threat, where it is today, but also where it's going to be 5-10 years from now, so that we can support proactive responses rather than a reactive posture.
So 2 questions about that. When is are you going to have a report or output from this research that we can share out?
Sure. Yeah. So we'll have, like any project, this is a 2-year period of performance. Okay. We'll be producing reports over that period of time specifically related to UAS and the threats they pose to U.S. homeland and national security. The first suite or set of deliverables that will be available to the public will come out in the next couple of months.
Oh, good. Okay.
And then we'll maintain a relatively regular cadence of deliverables after that.
I think it's going to be highly relevant, Austin, and those of you tuning in, just, we'll let you know as soon as we can have those deliverables to share. I'll probably have you back to talk about them. So I have a billion questions to ask about drones, but I'm going to save them to get to some other headlines that we saw today. I guess I want to get to what happened in New York. So we just learned last night that a pair of brothers, ages 39 and 51, were arrested with a crazy cache of weapons in their Queens apartment. They'll be arraigned in mid-February. They could face jail sentences of 25 years each. But let me just read off what I saw on the press release, and I want you to respond, because in addition to knowing about drones, you are doing work on countering improvised explosive devices.
That's right.
Okay. So they found 8 operational IEDs. These look like pop cans with wicks in the picture. 1 partially constructed tripwire IED, 2 loaded AR-15 style ghost gun assault weapons, 2 loaded 9mm semi-automatic ghost gun pistols, 2 loaded 9mm semi-automatic 3D printed ghost gun pistols, over 600 rounds of ammunition for each of the firearms, 600 for each, 1 3D printer, 3 sets of body armor, and then numerous notebooks containing instructions on how to build these things and anarchist-related propaganda. And there's a bunch of other things I found. I'm not reading those off because I think these were the ones that just I want you to respond to about
Sure.
what that kind of said. So what is your analysis kind of thinking about that?
Yeah, sure. So first I'll say that we've, or maybe I'll just refer to Secretary Mayorkas stated and reported to Congress that we're currently seeing a surge in bomb-related threats. And so the fact that I think improvised explosive devices were involved in this arrest isn't surprising to me. It reflects that broader national level trend.
Okay.
And again, the truth is terrorists and again, we don't know the motives yet
Yeah.
of these specific individuals, but if we're drawing this out to talk about the terrorism or violent extremism landscape, we know that explosives continue to offer a lot of bang for the buck, and they continue to appeal to a wide range of violent extremists. In other words, this isn't a toolkit or a tool that's favored only by, say, Salafi jihadists or only by white supremacists or anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists. It's useful
Anybody.
really to all of them, or could prove to be useful to all of them. Something that stands out to me here, and a lot of the work that we're doing here at NCITE focuses on emerging threats, and particularly malign use of emerging technologies, right? How do these sort of malign actors, malevolent actors use commercial democratized tech to then get that like additional edge, right, on the security and counterterrorism workforce? This profile of sort of a cache of weapons is really telling about the nature of today's threat. First, you have soda cans with wicks in them, really, really relatively simple, rudimentary weapons that would create harm, right? They're weapons and probably devised for the purpose of creating harm. But nothing to write home about with respect to the sophistication of the devices. But you look at this and recognize, okay, some of these tools are tried and true and will continue to be used. That is the persistent, enduring threat. But what we're also seeing is that this is paired with not just ghost guns, but 3D printed ghost guns, right? And I think that's really descriptive and almost a microcosm or example of what we're seeing today, which is terrorists continue to use some of those tried and true tools while also finding ways by way of supplement to innovate and to use emerging technologies to circumvent monitoring, surveillance by law enforcement, to overcome existing opposite barriers to entry for actually conducting or planning an attack. 3D printed guns check a lot of those boxes.
Gosh, okay, well, some other things to keep us up at night. I want to return just for a second to the Sunday strike. I'm thinking, I guess because we're fresh off the news of the identities of these soldiers, they're all from the state of Georgia. And I just want to say their names because terrorism and targeted violence has real human costs. So the nation and the state of Georgia in particular are mourning the lives of Sergeant William Rivers, Specialist Kennedy Sanders, and Specialist Breonna Moffett. Our government has pledged some kind of response. We'll see where that goes. But I want you to put us in the militant's chair. Yeah. So how is a militant reading this? They just killed 3 service members and injured a bunch more. Does this encourage more drone use? Does it make the U.S. look more vulnerable? What do you see going forward?
Yeah, so my expectation is sort of on both sides. I think likely expecting that they have sort of poked a bear and are now waiting for a sizable military or kinetic response. And that may include moving into more population-dense areas, right, to avoid being targeted, and sort of anticipating the potential of a response attack by the United States on behalf of its fallen service members. On the flip side, this offers propaganda value, or risk offering propaganda value to these militants who can now claim to have landed a blow against a force that they are blaming for broader regional dynamics, right? In particular, been calling attention and seeing terrorist activity further motivated by the terrorist activity of Hamas in October, right? So we're continuing to see the second and third order effects, or the ripple effects of what happened now a few months ago and was continued to escalate more broadly in the region.
Well, it's certainly a dynamic world we're living in. I mean, over the weekend we had, ISIS claim responsibility for an attack during Mass in Istanbul. We had a Massachusetts man arrested for wanting to kill a bunch of Jewish people in that state. And so we just are kind of on our toes right now at this time.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that you came. I mean, you're a political scientist, but you know a lot about tech. I guess in closing, can you talk about the importance of interdisciplinarity on these problems?
Yeah, absolutely, and maybe exactly to your point, I'm a political scientist. I look at the struggle in society over the distribution of power and resources, right? And how individuals, groups, organizations sort of vie for control of those things. Why am I looking at tech, right? And the truth is, one, because tech is a useful tool to achieving those outcomes, but as it relates to expertise, it's essential that that I join forces with folks who are way smarter on those topics than I am. I get to work with Joel Elson, I get to work with Sam Hunter, and the rest of the team here at NCITE to combine that expertise, that knowledge, to offer just a more, I think, nuanced, well-rounded, and actionable set of insights into these types of issues.
Well, thank you, Austin, so much for lending your expertise. I learned a lot just in these few minutes together, and and I'm not scared. It doesn't scare me. It makes me feel like we get smart people on the case, and certainly a big group here in this country working on it. We had the State Department here last week thinking about these things. So the counterterrorism effort here in this country is broad and deep here at NCITE with all these researchers. So thank you for coming. Thank you for tuning in, whoever is watching Beyond My Mother, and let us know what you think, what you want to hear. You can email us at ncite@unomaha.edu. And that's a wrap.